So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today is the fourth class for the pearls of the Prophet ﷺ. We did go over a number of different, number of different ahadith, and we're still really within the same subject that we were doing before, which is, of course, reorienting our vision, reorienting our intention. So we went and discussed a number of different hadith. Remember, we would take a hadith, we would translate it, and talk about some of the sides that we need to understand what this hadith is encourages or at least teaching us to do. We're really taking the words of the Prophet ﷺ to kind of speak to us what we may sometimes just get carried away in going into so many detailed explanations. But of course, in the pearls of the Prophet ﷺ, we try as much as we can to focus on the ahadith rather than, let's call it, the sidetracking and getting off the hadith. So we would just take a hadith without going into all these explanations, and then we would let the hadith speak in telling us what is needed and what is necessary in order to redirect ourselves, redirect our vision, redirect our behavior, redirect our of course, our life. And we're just letting the Prophet ﷺ really speak to us what was inspiring, one, to him through the Quran, through the revelation, and at the same time, how the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us to do this application for, of course, the revelation. Let's look at this hadith. عن أبي هريرة. Now you could see this hadith is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Let's look at this hadith. أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رجل لأتصدقن بصدقة فخرج بصدقته فوضعها في يد سارق فأصبحوا يتحدثون تصدق على سارق فقال اللهم لك الحمد لأتصدقن بصدقة فخرج بصدقته فوضعها في يدي زانية فأصبحوا يتحدثون تصدق الليل على زانية فقال اللهم لك الحمد على زانية لأتصدقن بصدقة فخرج بصدقته فوضعها في يدي غني فأصبحوا يتحدثون تصدق على غني فقال اللهم لك الحمد على سارق وعلى زانية وعلى غني فأتي فقيل له أما صدقتك على سارق فلعله أن يستعف عن سرقته وأما الزانية فلعلها أن تستعف عن زناها وأما الغني فلعله يعتبر فينفق مما أعطاه الله. So what is the story? Let's look at the English translation. So a man said, I will certainly give charity. He took his charity, placed it in the hands of a thief. The next day, people were talking about him, saying, well, he gave his charity to a thief. He said, oh Allah, all praises to you. I will certainly give charity again. He took his charity and placed it in the hands of a prostitute. The next day, people were saying he gave charity to a prostitute. He said, oh Allah, all praises due to you for the thief and for the prostitute. I will certainly give charity again. He took his charity and placed it in the hands of a wealthy man. The next day, people were saying he gave charity to a wealthy man. He said, oh Allah, all praises due to you for the thief, the prostitute, and for the wealthy man. Then he was told, as for the charity to the thief, perhaps it will refrain him from stealing. As for the prostitute, perhaps it will refrain her from sinning. And as for the wealthy man, perhaps he will reflect on and spend basically for what Allah had given him. So a couple things to look in terms of this hadith. It's an authentic hadith, but you could see that this happens often where sometimes people would assume ill of someone that probably had tried to do the right thing. But then, of course, you would see that at the end, you may think that you had done the right thing and not realize that it probably is not going to get the acceptance from people because they will still talk about you. And definitely these people were talking about this person, that why would you give these kind of people? Now, did this person necessarily know that this donation was given to X, Y, and Z, or did he deliberately do it for that cause? Was it something that he had done it for that particular reason, and or was it a sadaqah? Certainly this wasn't a zakah, because a zakah, these different people, especially the rich man, is not zakah applicable. He wouldn't be zakah applicable. So therefore, this is a general sadaqah. Now, it's really important to mention, for sadaqah, it doesn't necessarily have to be for somebody poor. A sadaqah can be a comprehensive word to include any investment for a good cause. So if that investment for a good cause was somehow, for example, giving a person that is rich, but giving them money for perhaps encourage them to share, encourage them to give, and that's the same thing if we're talking about somebody that probably is engaging in illicit behavior, perhaps motivated. They might have given themselves the justification that, well, I'm basically in need, therefore it would be a good cause. In other words, the ends justifying the means. And you could say that when we're speaking about sadaqah, a sadaqah can be a smile, a sadaqah can be money that is given. So in that situation, if the person was doing it for a good cause, for a good intention, in order to change and bring about a change within the society, even when people may not understand your motives, may not understand the reason why you would be doing a certain investment, as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing your intention, that's all that matters. Now, you could see, of course, if you were probably there, you would probably have said the same thing. Why would you do this in the wrong way? And you just would assume that this person is somehow, let's say, unaware, somehow not smart in contributing for the right cause, but the person that might have contributed, they might actually have a different intention, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would judge them based on the intention and not necessarily based on the appearance and what people would think would be a wise choice to invest in. Now, this is important to mention. So when we're looking at the different circumstances, that's for you as well to research, for you as well to make sure that you're probably looking at things from a different angle and not necessarily the angle that everyone is looking at. So if you are looking at things from a different angle and you invest towards that good cause, even if many might disagree whether that was wise or not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically reward you based on the intention. So this is important to just keep in mind. And we're talking about the intention, even though sadaqah, and certainly the amal itself, the actions themselves, are not probably applicable within those areas, but just for the intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rewarding those people just for the intention, even though it probably, according to those that are observing the situation, considering it that it wasn't making sense. It was not logical. These people are not zakah applicable, and the list goes on and on. So there are certain situations that you have to do your own judgment. You have to do your own sincerity, and you have to, I guess, let your wisdom determine a lot of the things that surround you. It's a pretty interesting hadith. I really wanted to include it because oftentimes we would see people judging different, let's just say at least good intentions, or at least judging people's motives, considering it that that's not smart. Why would anybody do that? And don't be too fast in judging people's choices. You never know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will regard that. There is a very interesting story for Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Just an idea who's Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, his mother and father were Turkish and Uzbek. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, his father was a farmer, but he wasn't a farmer working in his own field. He was a farmer working for someone else. So one day, I guess the master, the chief, the CEO, whatever you want to call him, he asked Abdullah ibn Mubarak's father to grab him some kind of fruit. He grabs the fruit, but the fruit was rather not sweet. It was stale. It was not the right taste, definitely. So that man was surprised. So he asked him to get another one. He got him another one, a third one, a fourth one. And he said, you've been working in these fields for a long time. In other words, where's your experience to help you identify which one is right and which one is wrong, and which one is ripe enough to be eaten, and which one wasn't ripe enough to be consumed? So he said, I don't own this, and it wouldn't be permissible for me to eat any of this, so I don't have the experience to know what the taste is going to be, because I did not want to consume something that is haram. So this is the father for Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak was known as a scholar, but he was more known for his zuhd. I want you to use that word. I think it's a very rare word that many times people are, I guess, unfamiliar with the word. What is the word zuhd? The word zuhd, in English, it means asceticism, but it doesn't really give it credit for what it really is. Because zuhd, and even in Lugha Arabiya, many times people would think that zuhd is to live somewhat in complete poverty. But that's not necessarily what it is. You can be a millionaire and be a zahid. How would that even make sense? Because zuhd is not necessarily being poor in, they would explain it that it's the wealth being in your hand and not in your heart. So metaphorically, that the wealth, you could be a millionaire, but to you, $1 million is equal to even $5, because you recognize that it's not the money that makes value. It's not the money that makes our goal. The money, we would use it in order to, I guess, invest in good causes, invest in good things. So that's a person, even though they're millionaires, but they recognize that money is to be invested for a good cause, because their cause, their purpose is aiming at the akhirah. That's a zuhd. So when we speak about zuhd, it could be scholars like Abu Hanifa even though he was considered a millionaire to the point that he was capable of funding his own students. So his own students, he would select the smartest students, choose those students, fund them, basically even pay for their living, pay for their stay, pay for their shelter, pay for their food, and perhaps even pay for their marriage. So that was not for just one student or two, but that was basically Abu Hanifa and his relationship with most of his students. So looking at that, that would tell us that if Abu Hanifa wanted to make money out of this, what he would have probably done, he would have probably, hey, I'm the greatest scholar in Baghdad, the greatest scholar in the Muslim world, so I could probably get richer and charge the students and let them somehow suffer in order to let them do the job, probably work part-time job, full-time job, and basically make money in order to pay me. So that's not what zuhd would look like. But because Abu Hanifa was more concerned about talab al-ilm, he was the one that was capable of using his own money and his own intelligence. Basically, of course, the rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was also using definitely his intelligence to basically run his business. What kind of business what was he running? So the kind of business that he was running was fabric business. So he would basically sell fabric. He would hire certain people to basically work in his stores, kind of like a fabric store. And then, of course, the money that was coming in from these stores, that's what he would use in order to, of course, fund the students, make sure that whatever is necessary for the classes, that whatever the business and whatever income it's bringing in, it would go for basically funding all those classes and all those students as well. So this is just an idea. So when we're speaking about zuhd, we're speaking about having not the money out of your hands, in other words, and not necessarily poverty, but you've got the money, but you're spending it for a good cause. So this is the first hadith. Let's go for another for famous quotes that interpret and explain. We were supposed to do that last week. Let's look into those. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad. Just an idea about Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad was actually known for doing something rather strange. He was a gangster. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, of course, he was a gangster and he had agreed to meet with a girl, and Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad was going over from one rooftop to another rooftop, and then in one time when he was on one of the rooftops, he was overhearing a woman recite ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع
Oh,
قلوبهم
yeah.
وما نزل من الحق. You remember the story, Noura? And he was
Yes, yes.
overhearing the woman. Isn't it time for the believers that their hearts would soften by hearing the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not be like the people of the book. They had the revelation, but then they lived in that fisq and they lived away from the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them, and then by time they had lost their faith. So here Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, of course, makes the tawbah, and later on basically becomes a alim. So I guess he was around mid-20s when this happened. Let's see what he said. إن العمل إذا كان خالصا ولم يكن صوابا لم يقبل، وإذا كان صوابا ولم يكن خالصا لم يقبل، حتى يكون خالصا وصوابا. والخالص أن يكون لله، والصواب أن يكون على السنة. ثم قرأ قوله تعالى: فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. So, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, let's quote: Indeed, a deed is not accepted unless it is both sincere and correct. I want you to pay attention to this one. So, for any action, for it to be accepted, it has to be sincere and correct. Well, what is the definition of sincere and what is the definition of correct? He said, if a deed is sincere but not correct, it will not be accepted. And if it is correct but not sincere, it will not be accepted. It must be both sincere and correct. So what does it mean that it's sincere and correct? He said sincere means that it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's pretty straightforward. And correct means it follows the sunnah. In other words, it's following the guidance of Islam. Then Al-Fudayl recited the verse. So whoever hopes for meeting with his Lord, let him do righteous work and not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course in his worship. Now, looking at that, this isn't necessarily just Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad somehow deriving it and getting the inspiration perhaps from the ayat. But this is basically what even the Sahaba had been learning from the Prophet ﷺ. Let's see what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had said. Who's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the fifth or fourth to become Muslim. And he said, لا ينفع قول إلا بعمل. لا ينفع قول إلا بعمل. Let's see the second one. ولا ينفع قول وعمل إلا بنية، ولا ينفع قول وعمل ونية إلا ما وافق السنة. So what does that mean? Sorry, ironically, I didn't actually translate this one, but that's okay. I'll translate it right now orally. لا ينفع قول إلا بعمل. No words are going to be considered as accepted unless this was accompanied by righteous action. ولا ينفع قول وعمل إلا بنية. And no words, so in other words, we're speaking about somebody saying, let's say tasbih, dhikr, any words, or even any action, unless there was an intention accompanying such an action. Now, this is extremely important to mention. So it's not enough to just say subhanallah if your intention is probably not there, not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or your intention was to make it for somehow to gain acceptance, to gain somehow people speaking about you, etc. Then in that situation, it would not be accepted. ولا ينفع قول وعمل ونية قول وعمل ونية إلا ما وافق السنة. So, and no words, actions, or intention is accepted unless it was based on the guidance of Sunnah. Let's give an example to this. So let's say لا ينفع قول إلا بعمل. Let's say a person, they basically had wanted to do قراءة Quran. But when they were reciting the Quran, they weren't applying it in life. They'll get the deed for reading Quran, but if they're not applying it in life, it won't have this implication on their hearts. It won't have this impact, this influence on their identity. Because if they're just reading it and not really putting it into action, that's definitely going to be a problem. ولا ينفع قول وعمل إلا بنية. So if we are to also have, on the other hand, قول, the words and actions, let's say salah, there are words, there are actions. but the person's niyyah was to probably please other people, then in that situation, that action would not be accepted. Even if it is qawl and amal, words and an action, unless there was an intention that was accompanying all of this. What does it mean that there was an intention? It basically would mean that we're speaking about the sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولا ينفع قول وعمل ونية إلا ما وافق السنة. So let's say a person said Bismillah and they had an action where this action perhaps was, give me any action. They said
Drinking.
Bismillah, drinking. Okay. And then what happened? They did a amal and they said, well, because the situation of the ummah and what's happening to the Muslims in around the world, this person started drinking. Okay. Why? Because they're really sad about the situation. They're really sad about the situation. So what they do is basically they say that they're drinking for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh, but of course, this wouldn't be acceptable, and this isn't a form of applying faith. Just because you thought that somehow I'm just so angry at the situation, believe it or not, in Palestine, I know this sounds ironic because many people would think that the people in Palestine are all like the people in Gaza. Even if we're talking about the people in Gaza, not everybody is at the same level of Iman. Not everyone is at the same level. Those stories that you would hear, those rare incidents of a woman perhaps having all her children get killed, but she's still saying Alhamdulillah. Yes, a lot of people had done that in Gaza, but don't imagine it like it's everyone. Okay, well, that's the same thing even when we're speaking about the Muslim history. The situations of those rare incidents were mentioned because they were rare, not because they were prevalent, because they were rare cases. So when we're looking at, for example, this, I know you find it weird, but believe it or not, we do have a number of different, especially from Fatah and those secular movements. They basically had considered that just by being what they would consider patriotic or watani, that was basically proving that that person is basically a person of at least piety, a person that was better than all those people that are praying and not engaging in what they're engaging in terms of talking about politics and constantly just talking about Palestine, that these people are patriotic. It's like, oh no, wait a minute. You want to be patriotic, it's supposed to be, whether we're speaking about patriotic, you're trying to be good, you're trying to invest in a good cause, it has to be based on sunnah. It has to be based on sunnah. It has to be based on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded that that's what it means to support the good cause. Let's see Sufyan al-Thawri. He said, oh, actually, here's Ibn Ajlan. Let me talk about Ibn Ajlan for a bit. Ibn Ajlan was actually at the level of Hassan al-Basri. It was mentioned that he was at the level of al-Hassan al-Basri in his deen. Let's see what he said. لا يصلح العمل إلا بثلاث: التقوى لله والنية الحسنة والإصابة. He said, no deed is valid except with three things: piety to Allah, a good intention, and correctness. So what does it mean that it's correct? It means to perform it according to Islamic law, Sharia. I guess in Ibn Ajlan right there, I would say, I think that's my preferred definition, because he got the point straightforward and went into, I guess, directly to the point. Let's do it again. No deed is valid except with three things: piety to Allah, in other words, sincerity, a good intention, and correctness. But is it that easy? So let's see Sufyan al-Thawri, what he said. ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي لأنها تنقلب علي. ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي لأنها تنقلب علي. Sufyan al-Thawri, I had never dealt with anything more difficult than my intention, for it can turn against me. What is that to tell us? Well, that's basically to tell us that what we're supposed to be focusing on is the intention. It's so easy and a lot easier to look into scrutinizing whether the action is going in accordance to Islamic law. It's very easy to do that. But in niyyah is even harder to work on because your own intention can sometimes give you the self-manipulation, and you would think that you're doing the right thing, or that sometimes it would somehow play games on you and then get you into a different motive. And even though your action was based on Islamic law, your words was going based on Islamic law, everything was going right. Let's see right there. Mutarrif ibn Abdullah, he said exactly the same thing. The righteousness of the heart is linked to the righteousness of deeds. And the righteousness of deeds is linked to the righteousness of intention. Well, that actually means the same thing that the Prophet ﷺ had said. إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله. If it has gone right, then all the actions had gone in accordance with it, the right direction. And well, what was he really talking about? He was talking about ألا وهي القلب. This mudgha, this piece of flesh, is basically the heart itself. Let's look at this. I'm going to jump really quick because we need to go to the other ahadith. قال معاذ بن جبل كان عمر رضي الله عنه اللهم اجعل عملي كله صالحا واجعله لوجهك خالصا ولا تجعل لأحد فيه شيئا. Umar ibn Khattab used to make the dua, "Oh Allah, make all my deeds righteous and make them sincerely for your sake, and do not let anyone have a share in them." Let's go for another one. How do we work on our deeds? Mu'adh ibn Jabal was telling Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, "Ya Abdullah ibn Qais, Ya Abdullah ibn Qais, كيف تقرأ القرآن?" قال: أفوقه تفويقا، أي أجزئه أجزاء، فأقرأه جزءا بعد جزء. فقال له أبو موسى: وأنت يا معاذ كيف تقرأ القرآن؟ قال: أنام من الليل فآخذ حظي من النوم ثم أقوم بالقرآن فأصلي به ما شاء الله أن أصلي، فأحتسب نومتي كما أحتسب قومتي. فالمسلم بالنية. Here we go. So Muslim, let's look at this one. Mu'adh ibn Jabal and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, they're sitting together, friends, they're both Sahaba. And he said, "Oh, Abdullah ibn Qais." Abdullah ibn Qais basically is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari's name. "How do you recite the Quran?" And he said, "I recite it in parts. I would read here and there, sometimes Surah al-Qasas, another time perhaps Surah al-Shara, and so forth." Then Abu Musa asked, "And you, Mu'adh, how do you recite the Quran?" He said, "I sleep at night, take my share of sleep, and then I get up to pray with the Quran as long as Allah wills." In other words, what does he do? Rests first, then after that, just gets up in the middle of the night, takes some time to read his Quran. "And I intend my sleep as I intend my standing in prayer." And this is important. Like before he would put himself to sleep, I guess, the part about sleep it really varies from one person to another. It's not always the same. Believe it or not, I guess this is worthy of mention. Were the scholars sleeping at night and waking up in the day, or were they doing the opposite? Most scholars didn't have a sleep regimen. So they weren't necessarily sleeping in the day and waking up at night, or sleeping during the night and waking up during the day. They didn't have a sleep regimen. Most scholars, they slept when they got sleepy, and then as long as they had the motive to write, the motive to research, they would stay up. And whether that was during the night, whether that was during the day, they basically had no specific or a specific timing for sleep, or no specific regimen for sleep hours or wake up hours. It wasn't like that. It was, if I have the enthusiasm to study, the enthusiasm to learn, I had the focus to be able to do it, I'll do it. But if I got sleepy, I would just let the intention be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they would sleep. Whether that was during dhuhr time, whether that was at 10 a.m., whether that was 9 a.m., maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m. No, they didn't have a specific regimen. That was the case for most of the scholars, and not necessarily, I know, scientifically, they may say it's not the healthiest thing to do, because they would want you to get a good night's sleep and not fight off sleep. But this is what they had done. It'd be really interesting to hear what a doctor thinks of this and what studies are actually telling us of this regimen. And I would say the most ones that stand out with this type of regimen that I personally I would say perhaps right now they're on my mind, in Nawawi. In Nawawi from Syria. In Nawawi, he's basically the one that compiled al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya and also Riyadh al-Salihin. But here's one bad news. In Nawawi didn't even make it to his 45th birthday. It's not like we were so excited to make a cake and a birthday cake, but it's just to help us know that, yes, al-ajal is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But certainly, just to keep in mind that it wasn't, I guess, affecting everybody and doing them well. Shafi'i lived up to 45 years old, and he was also known for this kind of, let's say, sleep disorder, I would call it. But there are other scholars that were also following this regimen, but actually lived longer. Abu Hanifa, he passed 80 years old. And al-Bukhari lived, I guess, mid-60s, so not pretty long. But you had, of course, different scholars that also didn't have. Al-Qardawi lived until he was almost 98 years old and didn't necessarily have a sleep pattern. He was those that were close to him also said that he didn't have a specific sleep pattern. So hey, we're seeing somebody that lived 98, and we're seeing someone that lived 45. So just, I guess, see whether this suits you. Every single person. Some people are night owls. Others, they like to sleep in the daytime or during the night, but it's definitely healthier to sleep during the time because even the ayat are encouraging that. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala جعلنا الليل لباسا. جعلنا الليل لباسا. What is اللباس? Libas certainly is more relating to modesty, is relating more for a time where you're covering your guests, bundling yourself up, etc. So that's al-layl is libasa. But at the same time, al-layl is full of those secrets of silence in order to help you focus as well. Okay, let's continue. So, of course, the Muslim would basically transform any, let's call it العادة إلى عبادة. So any traditional act that you might be doing, whether it's going to sleep or whether it's doing your daily chores, cooking for the children, whatever it is, if you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for it, even though it's a dunya action. But the dunya action, if it had the intention, it would be basically rewarded for like ibadah. Like ibadah or like any other worship, basically. Let's see. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said for us and to say, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. So that was the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, say, indeed, my prayer, my rites of sacrifice, my living, and my dying is all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of the worlds. He has no partner, and I've been commanded, and I am the first of the Muslims. Let's move on. I'll let you read that one. Now, I'll give you, I'll give you like 3-minute break, and then we're going to go into the second portion of this, which is reorienting our vision, embracing our life's purpose. So I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll pause the recording. I'll give you 3 minutes, and we'll come back, inshallah, so we can start this portion.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, Noura.
So every day, do we need to like, let's say we're gonna make a meal for our family or whatever. Do we need to like renew? How do we?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Is it every single time that I'm constantly just in as a general thing that I'm committed, I'm waking up early in the morning, I guess fixing my kids some food, etc., because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to basically be responsible, that's in itself is the intention. All right. So it doesn't have to be where I'm taking, I guess, a moment as a moment of some kind of a meditation.
And we don't have to say it out loud.
Right. No, you don't. Just for you, just by you recognizing that, hey, you could have done another thing, but the reason why you're being committed to probably cleaning your house, to probably fixing the food, or probably dressing up for your husband is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked you that this is min husn taba'ul mar'a li zawjiha. This is part of being a good wife, or being a good mother, and basically because the Prophet ﷺ said فَالْمَرْأَةُ رَاعِيَةٌ في بيت زوجها, that a woman is basically going to be asked about what she would and how she would basically perform her duties within her own household. So you getting up in the morning, even though you could have just overslept and probably not even cared about what the kids are going to eat and how the house is going to be cleaned and all of that, but you care to invest because you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would ask you all about this. But I would also say that, being, let's call it godly conscious. What do I mean by that? To basically feel the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's taking you into another level. So I'm right there, maybe kneading the dough or perhaps cooking the meat, and I'm thinking, Ya Allah, Allahumma laka alhamd, la ilaha illa ant. To constantly be doing that dhikr, all right, constantly be doing that dhikr, even though you're doing just a simple action that is considered perhaps a dunya action, but just to engage in dhikr, that's one other step. Let's call it, that's a mile step farther than just doing the right action and having the right intention. But to engage in dhikr when you're doing that, that's a mile farther. You're standing right there, probably kneading the dough or whatever it is. Subhanakallahumma hamdik, la ilaha illa ant. Or it doesn't have to be consistent if you don't know how to focus, but every couple minutes, la ilaha illallah, or every few minutes. Or, hey, I don't know how to continuously talk and do all of that because it's distracting me. I can't focus. So what I personally like to do is I would, stick my phone with me, and the phone would basically have different lectures, maybe podcasts, um, maybe different for Ratib al-Nabulsi is definitely my fan. I would put Ratib al-Nabulsi, and right now, basically, Waddah Khanfar is right now the number one person that I'm listening to, who basically is talking about Islamic history, talking about the political situation and so forth, really of the Ummah. And there are, of course, well, I don't know if AI right now translates directly in English, but I know that there can be subtitles. But of course, you're not going to be able to have the subtitles while you're working and doing all of that. But could be listening to just different lectures while you're working. That's basically a form of, let's call it audio dhikr. Audio dhikr is part of dhikr. If, let's say, this is distracting your children and they're like, Mom, this is just too noisy. Yeah, all of a sudden, they forgot, and they had forgotten about the noises that they would be making. And all of a sudden, my lectures are becoming the ones that are noisy and not that they're yelling and screaming. So I would then say, hey, can you perhaps use headphones? But I need to hear what the kids are doing. So I guess اتقوا الله ما استطعتم. Have taqwa as much as you can. So look at your circumstances. Based on the circumstances, see what type of an investment you could do in engaging in dhikr, in engaging in expanding your ilm, in expanding your commitment, and making that commitment be as consistent for as long as you can. Did I answer the question, Noura?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. So what I'll do, I'll give you, I guess right now, 2 minutes. Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes, and inshallah, we'll come back and do this portion of it, inshallah. So this is, yeah, so I'm going to be stopping it, and how do you do this?